All right, next we'd like to welcome up Mr. Harkins. I'm sure you guys know him as a former accounting teacher here, so let's give him the floor. Thank you.
Thank you, Nick. Thank you, Steve, for going to the effort to get this panel together, and to Nick for organizing it and getting us here to get all the work. We appreciate it. And thank you all for showing an interest in this, what has become a localized topic, but what I'm here to do is to help you understand it also has statewide consequences to it. Now, several people ask me why in my retirement I would choose to get involved in something like this rather than go down to Lewiston and play around with golf. Let me tell you, it's based around some personal experiences. First, some data. From January 1st, 2002 to December 31st, 2011, this 6.5 mile stretch of road we're talking about has had 220 automobile accidents, or accidents involving moving vehicles. 138 injuries produced in that 10 years, and to my great sadness, 6 people were killed, 2 of which were former students. So I have a very personal interest in this issue. On the one hand, I can say I don't much care which route we pick. Safety being the #1 issue, we have certified documents which suggest to us a favored route. Not that it's perfect and not that all deaths are going to be eliminated, but I can tell you the data supports about 1.4 people less per year killed than the other 2 alternatives. And here I'm referring to E2 as the preferred alternative. But one more stat to get your attention. From a statewide perspective, there are what they call accident or crash zones. There are a number of them on the 6.5 mile stretch. 3 of those rank in the top 13 in the entire state, all in a 6.5 mile stretch. So you need to get your head around that a little bit. Now, just a survey, how many of you have traveled on that section of road that we're talking about? So most of you are familiar with it. No question, and I certainly won't take issue with Steve's position that something needs to be done. And I'm pleased that we're at the stage of now down to the final moments where we can articulate our views, get a road that works for the community, and we can move on to other issues. I learned from Steve that at least most of the econ students that are here may or may not have seen the environmental impact statement. And since it's been referenced, it's important that you know that's a document that's easily accessible by you. The Idaho Department of Transportation is providing the entire report on their website. Some of you may benefit. They did a summary in the guide to the environmental impact statement. Now, my experience with EIS statements goes way back. I've fooled around with them for 40 years. One of my topic areas at the University of Washington was public policy, public decision making. And so I've been engaged on a number of projects to help people evaluate and understand the environmental impact statement. This one set a record for me. 340 plus pages for a 6.5 mile road project. Believe me, they uncovered a lot of stones as they put together their work on this. When you open up either the guide to or the preamble or the introduction to the environmental impact statement, you will discover that they focus on 2 primary things. First of all, what is the problem? They need a clear definition of what problem it is they're trying to fix. And once the group organizing the EIS has a fix on what is the problem, then they are expected to go through a series of analyses to determine what is the appropriate means of adjudicating or eliminating those problems. They were very clear in this document. The purpose of the project is #1, absolutely #1, to improve public safety. #2, and this one may surprise some of you, and it opens up the gate for getting a full appreciation of an environmental impact statement. What they're after is increasing the highway capacity. US95 is part of a network road that runs all the way to the southern part of the state to the border with Canada. It's the only north-south thoroughfare or road that connects the southern part of the state with the northern part of the state. And we have become the bottleneck. Our 6.5 mile stretch imposes a cost not just on people who live in Moscow or who live in Latah County, but every single person who travels up and down US 95 is an impacted person. They become a stakeholder. And that becomes important when you're conducting an environmental impact statement for the expenditure of state highway funds. The state perspective must be considered. There's no alternative. Now, have a little, someone's not quite happy with my comments. This is a baby cry.
No, she's happy with them.
When we understand and have a clear focus on the purpose of the project, we're going to try to find a way to mitigate the safety issues. Then we begin to focus our attention on what are the other things that might be necessary for us to consider. And this is where the environmental impact statement begins to develop its teeth. First of all, in terms of understanding the objectives that would need to be achieved to accomplish the primary goal of safety, here are some of the things that they thought about. We need to convert the 6.5-mile section to 4 lanes. We need to add a 12-foot center turn lane. We need to add curbs, gutters, sidewalks in the urban section. We need to reduce the curves. We need to deal with lessening grades if it's possible to do that. If you've traveled the section we've got now, there are numerous grade changes that occur in that 6.5-mile stretch. We need to widen the shoulders so that people can have a safe access in bad weather to be able to extricate themselves from the problem. We need to add right and left turn lanes at county road intersections. We need to improve the ditches that line those roads. We need to be sure we limit access. Right now, you may not know this, there are 66 access points in that 6.5-mile road. You want to know why there's a fair number of accidents? Because there's all of those turnings taking place in that 6.5-mile stretch. That's 10 per mile. That's a lot of access points. And you get the idea of what they have to think about. But what happened next? Well, what happened next was to consider what alternatives would be available to us. And they did look at the central quarter, the eastern quarter, and the western quarter. And they initially had 11 alternatives. Then, through the process of evaluation, as the technical reports came in on the 14 or 16 elements that can be considered when you do a road, what they determined was there was one preferred western route, one preferred central route, and one preferred eastern route. And that's how we got to this stage right here. Then, using fundamental analysis, the committee, which was putting this together, then has to evaluate the 3 remaining alternatives according to the elements which are a part of this project. And I think it's important to go through them to suggest that this wasn't just a bunch of people sitting around smoking cigars in a dark room, making agreements with each other about how they're going to get this and that passed. Let me assure you, if you pull up the environmental impact statement, you will discover there were 33 individual professionals involved with conducting this statement. 33. Every one of them had a degree appropriate for the task or mission which was their challenge. First of all, what were the elements that the committee had to consider? Air quality, cultural resources, energy, farmland, floodplains, groundwater, hazardous materials, land use and recreation, noise, socioeconomic environmental justice, threatened and endangered species, transportation, including safety, weather, highway expansion, vegetation, fish and wildlife, visual quality, wetlands and tributaries, indirect and cumulative effects, all leading to a series of technical reports. When you get the guide or the environmental income statement, you will be quickly referenced to Appendix 2. This is a listing of all the individual areas that were considered by the Environmental Impact Statement Committee and their technical background. The average years of experience was something like 18, 19 years of experience for these 33 individuals that worked on this project. And they covered 16 different technical report areas. Or excuse me, 14. Back to a little bit of a lesson on benefit cost analysis. The fundamental protocol that comes into play on social decisions is something called a benefit cost analysis. Once the EPA was created some 20 years ago, the language had to be refined from benefit cost analysis to an environmental impact statement. But the fundamental process for producing the documents that are required and the information that's required is basically founded upon the concept of benefit cost analysis. In other words, when we look at a project like US95, we attempt to identify, first of all, what problems do we solve and what are the associated costs associated with those problems, and then try to compare those costs with the cost of the new investment that's necessary to fix the problem. Once you've got the costs identified, you can then focus on what are the benefits of the various approaches. What you hope emerges is a relatively clear direction as to how to proceed. Nothing could be clearer in my mind than the economic benefit of producing E2, which shows something in the neighborhood of a $41 million cost as a result of the accidents that have occurred on that road. Interestingly enough, the road could have been built back in 2002 for less than that $41 million. So we've already incurred the cost of the highway, and now we're dealing with what's your generation going to do about the problem? How are we going to fix it? The safety issue is pretty clear. I don't think we'll have anybody come forward and say that the safety issue wasn't more or less properly done. There is about 1.4 deaths less in E2 by their statistics than with C3. And someone would say that's just a number, 1.4. My response to that person is usually, okay, so you'll be willing to take the place of the next person who's going to be killed on the road. And I haven't had any volunteers for that yet. I don't expect to. But what I am here to emphasize is that we cannot do better than to make the death rate as absolutely low as possible for that 6.5-mile stretch. How does the committee go about assessing these kinds of issues? Well, here's how it works. In its simplest form, how do you mitigate conflicting interests? Well, first you have to understand you've got to make sure you get the population of stakeholders correct. And remember, the stakeholders here in Moscow and in Latah County are not the total set. Everyone who crosses through that 6.5 miles is impacted. Consequently, any solution has to deal with that particular population as well. Now, take the 14 elements, 16 elements that we're supposed to think about and then put it into this jar. On the one hand, you've got a local landowner who has a residence that's going to be impacted by the movement of the road. And depending on which way you move the road, east or west, that's going to involve different folks. So we've already got a major conflict there. There are some people who live on the west side who don't want this road anywhere near them. There are a lot of people on the east side who don't want this road anywhere near them. Okay? So what do? Well, what you also have to consider is, okay, there's 2 families impacted, 3 families impacted. Now we come down to another situation. Consider all of the folks driving up and down, business people, tourists, students, parents, driving between Boise and San Antonio. If they pass through Moscow, they're part of the set. I can tell you, would beyond a shadow of a doubt, without knowing anything about the issues, they would say, anything you do would be better than what you've got now. And I would tend to agree. But we have to get to the subtle arguments of where is the money best spent and where are the benefits to be accrued. And that's where you have to start taking a very, very fine look at the environmental impact statement. Because as they go down through every single one of the technical elements, they will have assessed and provided you the basis for their conclusions. Suffice it to say, there were no major, and by that I mean major, things that would cause them to say, the one landowner is more important to us than the 300 or 400 or 500,000 people that travel up and down that highway every year. What you're going to find is a very clear description of the facts that they considered in making their decision. And I personally have read every single one of the technical reports. I can fuss a little bit about the statistics here and there, but bottom line, what I can tell you is, from my standpoint, they didn't find an overwhelming argument anywhere in the document that would place C3 or W4 above E2. Combine that with the fact that E2 comes hand down as the safest route to go. It's obvious to me, for my tax money, and for the lives of people that travel up and down that road, I think it's time to move forward with E2. I thank you.